Welcome to the Future Worlds 20-Minute Founder. Future Worlds is the on-campus startup accelerator at the University of Southampton. We exist to help the aspiring founders at the university to change the world with their ideas. And one of the great inspirations that we see time and time again for those aspiring founders is to see great role models who have gone before, who have ploughed a path to finding a way to make a difference in the world through launching a startup. And so it is a great privilege today to welcome Sarah Porter, who's going to be sharing her story founding Inspired Minds with us. But just a reminder, as we get started, do make sure you're signed into YouTube so you can use the chats. Engage with other people in the audience, ask your questions through the chat as well as we're going. Towards the end, I'll be then going through the chat and trying to ask some of those questions to Sarah so that we can be interactive in this live event. So make sure you use the chat. Another little bit of housekeeping. If for some reason there's a problem with the link, if we lose the connection with YouTube, we've got a backup link that we'll fall onto. So refresh, go to the Future Worlds channel on YouTube. You'll be able to find the backup link straight away and we'll go straight onto there. If you've registered for the event, you'll also get an email with the link as well. But we will be carrying on as much as possible, tech allowing. But enough of that from me, other than to say as well at the end, if you've still got questions, Sarah and I will be joining the live chat at the end of the session as well. So you can always stay around afterwards, ask questions then, and we can follow up. But as I said, Sarah Porter is the founder of Inspired Minds, which is a global group, a community of over 200,000 people across 150 countries worldwide that are specializing in using AI for good and have been able to spearhead some incredible groundbreaking initiatives like World Summit AI, the largest AI tech summit in the world. Sarah, it's a great privilege to welcome you to the 20-Minute Founder stage this evening. And I guess the obvious place to start is exactly that. Where did it all start for you in launching Inspired Minds?
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much. And firstly, thank you, Ben. Thanks for inviting me for being here. And it's a pleasure to join you all and your community. So where did it all start? Well, I think I found myself in a blank sheet of paper situation. And that blank sheet of paper situation was in 2016, so 2016, which I've lost all track of time since being a founder. But I believe that was approximately 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago. And I basically, and I can talk to you in a bit about why I found myself in this precarious situation where I had a completely open blank canvas in front of me about what I was going to do next. Now, my background has always been in technology and has always been in creating communities. And I decided, and I've always been involved in things like mergers and acquisitions and market spotting and looking at future trends and this sort of thing. And I could see at the time that there was some emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence that were going to make a substantial difference to the world in which we live. And that could go either way. It could go in a very, very positive way. And I'm not going to go Elon Musk on you here and say that it's all doom and gloom, but also artificial intelligence in the wrong hands or used in the wrong way could end up with some really detrimental results for humanity. So I decided to set about building a company which was all about how to ensure that emerging technology was used in such a way that it could solve some of humanity's greatest challenges, and equally that it was doing so in a way that was diverse, inclusive, and for good, which, you know, as a principle, as a moral value for a principle of the company, that's pretty much what we were about. It was artificial intelligence for good. Now, the starting place for that and the kind of blueprint for that, because that sounds like this huge, humongous task, if you like. And I started with no experience in artificial intelligence itself. I'm not a data scientist, I'm not a computer scientist. So we started out with, okay, what's the starting point for this and what's the framework for doing that? And we just identified that the challenges that we would start with was the United Nations global goals. So looking at the SDGs and identifying which of those, and we sat down as a team, well, I say as a team, it was me and my poor children at that point, my sounding board for development, and we look at that and say, okay, which of these do we feel right away would be the first ones that we wanted to work on? And we set about starting to build, or I set about starting to build a community which was Inspired Minds. Now, inspired, the word in Latin, means to breathe life into, and we wanted to breathe life into people and inspire them with ideas about how technology could solve those global problems. That's how it started.
Wow. I mean, as you say, it starts with this huge, lofty ambition. I mean, not only AI, this great frontier in technology where there's, as you say, doom and gloom, but also hope and optimism. This could transform everything. So you're saying, okay, do that for good, but also all of the questions of diversity in AI. And you're saying, right, let's crack that as well. And so let's just add to that. We'll take the UN Sustainable Development Goals, some of the loftiest existential challenges facing humanity, and let's crack those too. I mean, it's a huge place to start. How do you go from that global vision into the first steps that you as an individual are going to take to try and get some momentum?
It's a good question. And when you say it back to me like that, that filled me with utter fear. Then I have to say, the way that you were just saying that, I just felt my stomach go like, oh God, really? Is that what we did? Oh my goodness, you know. But at the starting point, well, I think as a person and as a founder, I'm quite a structured person. So the first thing that I did in that situation was look at first, and my team will all be sighing as I say this, but what is our why? And that is our why as an organisation on the bigger, broader scale values of what we stand for as Inspired Minds, and then the why as individuals within the team. So my personal why as a founder. And then we worked out and identified how. So, and the why was, there's two parameters to that. As I said, there's one which is the why of the business, which, as I've said, is to solve global goals, build a community around that to do that. And then the second is my why and my personal one. And I guess from a business point of view, the why was, okay, as we said, we wanted to solve some of humanity's greatest challenges. How do you do that? When you look at artificial intelligence and technology and the way that's being developed, it should be developed in a way that is interdisciplinary. So there should be a multitude of different, this is one of society's biggest impact techs that's coming up here, right? It's going to fundamentally change the world that we live in and everybody that's in that. So for that to be developed by one slim part of society is wrong. So the first thing that we did is identify that, okay, we need to build an interdisciplinary community of people that together can create that technology in a positive way. So our first step was to, and I'm working back here. So our first step then, having identified that that was the overall goal, was, okay, how do we do that? And the nitty gritty of how you do that, when our starting point was we had zero data, zero team, and I'd identified a couple of people that I wanted to work with. No money, really. I had a bit of money from a settlement and a house sale and all the rest of it, so no cash. And the first step, really, I think in that situation is, for me, was registering the company with Companies House, because then psychologically you're committing to do something, and identifying in tune with your kind of overall why as a business and my individual why, what the timescales were, and then plan to get to that. And I know that's probably going to unearth a whole heap of questions.
I mean, there's a whole host of questions, obviously, and you talked about your individual why versus the business why, and it'd be great to hear more about that individual why, because there's multiple ways that you could approach those big challenges. What's your why for the reason that you did it the way that you did it?
So my personal why is really, really simple, and that is, when I say it's very simple, it's probably not, it's complex, but in my mind it's very simple. And that is, firstly, I found myself in a situation where I had been wronged by an organisation and I wanted to put that right. And that was a gender issue where I wanted to go out to the world and say women can be successful in business and women can hold their place at the table, and they have a right to be here, and they have a right to be a part of the creation of the technology that's fundamentally going to change our world. So that's one. And then I think on the other level, it's the very personal why is, I want to give my children as a role model a really good example. I have two daughters and a son. And when I started this business, my youngest was 4 years old. My eldest was 12. And I wanted to give them that example as a mother that women can do this, people can do this. You can set your sights very high and set out to achieve that. So for me, it was about really giving them a stable support. Buying a home at some point would be good as well. that's on there as a why. I mean, we're not living in a shed, but we're still in rentals since I gave up the house to do the business. But to make sure that they have a stable home and also a good role model and example of what women can do.
And that, I mean, that has driven you to take serious risk in that sense. So you sold a house, you've poured savings into going down this journey. That is an uncertain future that you chart for yourself, certainly at the beginning, before you're looking back and saying 200,000 people, 150 countries, this incredible journey you've been on. At the start of that, of course, it's all uncertain. Kind of what drives you to take that risk?
So as I said, I found myself in a situation where I ran my own business for 10 years. I traded in that business to work for a corporate organisation at board level, and changed my life to do that. Spent less time with my kids, spent a lot of time travelling, but knew that there was an outcome. This was a 2-year contract that I was doing. At the end of that 2-year contract, I was going to get a big payout. And unfortunately, I was kind of shafted at the end of that, and I ended up not getting what I was supposed to get as a result. So, there's nothing that can fuel you more than anger, and as a mother, the reason that I'd relocated my children and done a lot of those things was for that why, which was always there. So I found myself in this situation where my world kind of fell apart, quite literally, and I had nothing to lose. I mean, I was literally told by the industry in which I'd built up a career and a reputation, you're done, you're not coming back into this market. We will not employ you again. I was also told that I would fail at what I was going to do because there was nobody like me that was doing that. I'm in my 40s, I'm a mum, I had no cash, I had no VC backing, I had no experience of AI. So there is nothing like the saying, which I think Tony Robbins says, which you have to burn your boats to take the island. And if you find yourself in a situation where your back is truly against the wall and you have absolutely nothing to lose, and you have something like your children as a why, as well as setting a role model for other young women in particular, so that doesn't happen again, there's your fuel. There's nothing more powerful than that. And I think that's why I was prepared to give everything that I had to make this business a success.
And wow, did you come out fighting and blazing a trail? I mean, what is it that what were those early steps that enabled you to come out fighting and to start getting that momentum? So you're starting at zero, and in a relatively short space of time, you've taken over the world. Like how did those early steps look?
So I've always been as I said, a market strategist. So the role that I had previously was head of mergers and acquisitions. So I've always looked at spotting market trends and identifying where markets were going to go. And a part of that is planning and strategical planning. So I have methods that in my 20+ year career so far that I have learned, which is you have to plan as if luck is against you and then execute as if luck is with you. So you have to really plan to the finite detail, and that's probably one of my strengths, I guess. So at the very start, kind of picking yourself up and dusting yourself off from that experience and deciding that that I'm talking myself as a you here, but that I was going to do this. And once I'd committed to do that, it was then about planning the first steps, which was how do I create a community and build a community from scratch. I think initially my background has also been in events and large-scale tech summits. Summits are a great way to build communities. So I set about finding some of who I still admire and who are still my founding team now, some of the absolutely best people that there are in the industry, and then trying to sell them my passion, if you like, and getting them to join me. And there's nothing more rewarding in the early stages of having an idea and a concept than somebody backing you, and somebody just going, do you know what, I get it, I get what you're trying to do. Okay, you might get 90% of people telling you you're bonkers. I remember going to one meeting and sitting with somebody that I've known, and he's a real sage in the industry. He'd been around for a very long time, very experienced. And I said, look, I've put my house on the line on this, will you back me? And he said, you're going to lose your house. I hope you don't like your house too much. Another guy said to me, your market knowledge is scant and your ideas is weak, and I remember at that point just thinking, okay, you keep getting those knockbacks, but then somebody will turn around to you and say, I get it, I see your vision and what you're doing, and I'm prepared to back you, be that with my time as a member of your team, or be that within angel investment, or whatever else it was in the early days. So we set about building a community, and we did that by using tools that were predominantly on an MVP model. Those of the audience that are familiar with the lean startup, it's all about bootstrapping. We're experts in bootstrapping. It's amazing what you can do for free. by utilising, psychology and community tricks and social media and so on. So that's kind of, I hope that alludes roughly to how we started.
Yeah, absolutely, and resonates very strongly, particularly in a university environment where you've got lots of students or researchers that are trying to start this journey, and all too often you can just look at the challenges, the barriers, the reasons why you can't, and yet role models like yourself give such an inspiration to actually seeing the reasons why you can, seeing the things you can do for free or cheap, and get those early steps. So what were some of the things that made the biggest difference? What do you look back on in those early days and think, oh, that was a turning point?
Oh gosh, there were so many. I mean, I think in the very early stage, the first stage of launching this business, and you're right, I put a lot on the line, and there wasn't a day I didn't go by where I didn't think I was going to quit. Where I didn't try and talk myself out of doing this, and your body's like telling you constantly, like, don't do it. It's the fear or flight thing, right? It's like, don't do it. But I remember one of the biggest turning points was firstly when we launched, firstly when one of my co-founder and one of my chief content officer now, Vidya, joined us. And instantly I knew she is absolutely inspirational, and she's brilliant at what she does. And she started creating amazing content, and we started putting it out there. So putting it out through free channels, through social media, through LinkedIn. We started building what we set out to want to do originally, was build the greatest program that anybody have seen with the greatest people in AI. And I quite literally just started contacting people and going out to people and say, this is what we're building. It's going to be fantastic. The free tools that we used, and one of the big turning points that we used, was a campaign that we called the Selfie by Selfie campaign. So I'd read, I can't remember the book now that I'd read it in, but it was about the power of herd mentality, and about the power of social proof. So, if we really wanted Jan LeCun to come along to this event, and Joshua and Kay Firth Butterfield, the head of the World Economic Forum, all these amazing people, and to listen to us, we really had to show them that their peer group were there. And then that kind of makes people feel, there's nothing worse than being a minority. And I guess that's a statement that alludes to more conversations that we're probably going to have. But people like to feel that they are a part of the movement, and they then get fear of missing out, and they don't want to do that. So we launched a thing called Selfie by Selfie campaign, which is, instead of having these lofty professors and these amazing AI people in a very formal way, which is what we were seeing in the market at the time from some of the other people that were doing this, the very slick picture of them like this. We said to them, we don't want that. We want you to take a selfie image of yourself in a situation that a lot of people, and don't necessarily see you in. And we want you to post that on your social media feeds and say you're coming to World Summit AI. And it went absolutely bonkers. I mean, very, very quickly, people were like, what is this movement? Why is Joshua Bengio going to them? What is all this about? And that just went absolutely crazy. And we went very quickly from 0 to 30,000 contacts in a short space of time. And that's one of the big turning points, I think, for us. The second one was when an angel investor, is actually one of your Future Worlds mentors, a guy called Chris Broad, who's from Apple previously, backed us as an angel investor with a sum at the very beginning when we had no revenues, we had nothing else. He just saw it and he got it, and he said, I want to be a part of this, and put money in at the very beginning. That was it. Then the second that was in, we were off. It was something.
And you allude to it, and absolutely, it's great having Chris Broad as one of the dragon investors every year at our Dragon's Den, and has backed multiple startups through Future Worlds, and we see the difference it makes. There's the money, but there's the confidence, isn't there? There's the sense that, okay, here is someone who's got money, but who's got reputation, who's got experience and expertise, and they're backing me. They're putting skin in the game to back me. Okay, right, maybe there is something in this.
It's absolutely true, and there's nothing more of a testament to what you're trying to do with somebody of that accolade, basically saying that they get it and they back you, and that's enough. As a founder, when you're starting, it's not even so much the sum of money, it's the fact that they're on board. So
yeah, absolutely. You allude to the doubts along the way and the sort of everyday questioning, why am I doing this? Is it going to work? And I guess that's often the sort of the hidden side of the startup journey, often there's such a success bias, isn't there? So we look back on how did Slack turn to 1 billion in a year? How did they go so quick? And how did I get 1 million users? And it's all around the successes and the high profile. But of course, in the early stages, the common experience of every founder is the self-doubt, the uncertainty. There's very little validation at that point. And so you're having to push through that kind of valley of death. What did that feel like from your side?
Absolutely awful. I mean, really awful. I mean, I think I'd love to sugarcoat it, and I do see a lot of the stories that you're talking about, where you see particularly guys right now standing out. They've created social media channels, whatever else it is, glamorizing being an entrepreneur and all the rest of it. And there's no doubt in my mind that there is no other career that I would want to choose apart from being a founder and an entrepreneur and a creator. But I have to say that, you have to be prepared to put up with the pain and the discomfort of being a founder. And that can be, that can affect you in any number of different ways. So for me, it was, at times I would be quite and I still get it now sometimes, quite literally overwhelmed and paralyzed with fear about, if I let myself go down this route of the what if, what could go wrong, particularly in the world that we're facing right now. I have a team now and I have people that I have to look after and so on and so forth. So if you let yourself go too far down the what if, then it becomes paralyzing. So you quite literally freeze and then you can't move. And I think I spent at the very beginning maybe periods of time where there would be days when I would roll from one day to another, waking up and just being, completely paralyzed. What do I do next? Where do I start? Now, there's a number of different things that I found now, and I think I'm getting reasonably good at the coping mechanisms that you develop as a founder around that. So one is fear setting as an exercise. Worked really well for me. That's something that I've seen Tim Ferriss talk about, which is where you really do go down that route of what is the worst that can actually happen, and how bad is that? And
let's play that through. Let's look at the white of the eyes.
White knuckle ride all the way to the end. Let's go all the way through that. And once you get to the end of that, then how bad really is it? Because your mind is an incredible thing at making things seem 10 times worse than what they really are. And when you get to that end result, you realize that sometimes, for example, I was worried about how many people are going to say no to this. Well, sometimes a no is better than a yes. And you realize that then, because sometimes a no helps you, especially in an MVP stage, it helps you clarify your product or refine what you're doing, or makes you realize you're not on the right track. Sometimes actually, getting a knockback can make you go on the right track. So it's not all that bad. So the fear setting is one. I think another is you really do have to get to a point. And I can remember for me when it was, I think it might have been Chris Broad actually that said it to me, or somebody else that said it to me, which was, okay, look, you're going on over and over in here in your mind, hypothetically, about the things that are bothering you about doing this. And yes, all of those things could happen. But now go out in your garden, get a shovel, bury that fear in the ground and get back in here and get on with it. And you have to get to a point where I think you just realize you've burnt those boats. You can't get out of this now. There is no other way of going back. And when you reach that tipping point, this amazing thing happens where you realize that even if you failure is not the end of the world unless you quit. And that always resonates with me. It's always in my mind. I always think now, I'm never quitting. I'm never quitting. That's simple. As far as I'm concerned, I will never stop. I will never say I give up. I might fail, or I might get things wrong, or I might get no's, but it's how you choose to react to that and then pivot that and use that in a way that rebuilds you, that I think helps you get through those darker moments.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear, because I think certainly my experience helping a lot of founders is it's in those periods, and they can be quite dark and depressing at times, that people can maybe then count themselves out and think, well, if I feel this way, then maybe I'm not cut out to be a founder. If I've got that fear, maybe it's not for me, or maybe it's just not the right thing. But actually, that's a common experience. It may not be talked about so often, but that's just the norm, and it's how you deal with it and how you respond to it. You alluded to some of the particular barriers, and there's obviously lots of questions and challenges around diversity in AI. And you alluded to some of the challenges in terms of your why, in terms of proving to your daughters, to your children, to others that you can do this. There's a place at the table for women in AI as tech startup founders. What do you see as some of the dynamics around that and some of the challenges around that?
It's a huge issue, right? And I think it's on two levels again. I think there's so the starting point is, if you look at artificial intelligence right now, that if it's going to create some of the biggest breakthroughs in the world, or tech or engineering or whatever else it is, we need a female perspective in that. Women need to have a perspective on that, because otherwise the majority of what's being created for everybody to use is being created by one segment of the population, and that's not cool, right? So why is that acceptable? So I think that's that. Firstly, I think then, why is there a problem that, you know, there's only 20% of roles in leadership and board positions that are women? Why is it that only 14% of VC backing in the UK last year went to female founders? You know, these are shocking, absolutely shocking numbers. And I think there's, so if we take a step back, Sam, I've looked at this a lot. Where does this problem come from? And I think if you look right back, let's go right back to a baby is born, right? A male baby is born, a female baby is born. And at that point, is there any reason why whatsoever there's anything there that would say that that baby, be it male or female, cannot be an engineer, an artificial intelligence data scientist, a computer scientist, whatever else it wants to be? Hell no. The way that we have trained young people and the way that we have brought up young people is giving them the impression that it's a biological reason that they cannot be what, you know, one of these careers in tech or whatever. But it's not biological, it's cultural. It's cultural. So we have trained girls to believe that they should be pink and pretty and play with dolls, and they should, and I know these things are changing, and it sounds like now, well, that's absurd, that's not happening, but that really is the case. You can still walk into a shop and you can still see gender assigned roles. You can see that on one side of the shop there are toys that are for girls. They'll be on the pink aisle. They're predominantly, the majority of them will be caregiving toys, or they will be fluffy dolls or unicorns or whatever it is, and all these things. And on the boys' sides, it will be blue, and it will be trucks, and it will be building blocks, and so on and so forth. And who the hell decided that? I mean, who decided that? Because if we raise our children and raise society in such a way that says there is no gender stereotypical role that girls or boys should be assigned from the very beginning, that's the very start of the problem, I think. So it's not biological, it's a cultural issue. Looking then onto AI, of course, AI is trained on data sets, and it's trained on the history of humanity, and that's what we feed it as a machine. And therefore, of course, it's just picking out all of those stereotypical biases that we've trained it to do so. So we could start with just purely by getting rid of gender as an issue from the very beginning, and not stereotyping how we educate and train girls and boys.
Yeah. And I mean, if I were to take the optimistic view on some of the negative, I suppose it's the likes of Disney princesses being redefined. Ralph broke the internet, and you get, you know, the complete slamming of the stereotypes of the princesses. Who would want to just wait around for a rich guy to come and save them? You know, define your own destiny. And Merida in Brave, kind of taking on the stereotypes, and hopefully we'll see a generation coming through that are learning the core skills of data science and AI that have been informed by a changed convention. But also, you talk to the motivation of actually having the door slammed in your face gave you that motivation, that push that I'm not going to be left out. No, there is a place at the table. And perhaps if you couple those two and see role models like you, where going the startup route has given you the ability to have this outsized impact far beyond what a conventional career maybe would have had, put those together, and maybe we can look forward to a generation of female founders who are coming through and taking to the world a perspective that has a far greater impact than we've seen before.
Yeah, and I think that's happening, right? I think you're starting to see that now, because actually now it is culturally unacceptable and socially unacceptable for women to not be included. You know, the women are bloody outraged now, the fact that there's only 14% of VC funding going to women, and people are starting more and more to speak out about that. There are groups that are forming as a result of that. There are community-led movements, which is great, because back to the point before, nobody wants to be a minority. You don't want to feel like a minority. I felt a lot like a minority as a female founder, as in AI, I still do, as as a working mum. All of these different issues that we come against, you know, you need other people around you that are supporting you, and that can be, you know, I've some of my greatest advisors are men who get it, and they know that not all men don't want to exclude women. You know, it's not that that's not necessarily the case. It's just over time this has happened, and now we need to rewrite our unconscious biases. And I think there is a lot of change happening, but also the onus is on us as women to be unapologetic about the fact that we absolutely are going to have a place in the room. We are absolutely going to be the world's greatest engineers. We're going to win Nobel Prizes. We're going to do all these things, and we're going to keep fighting. And if we're not, then we're going to call you out for leaving us out of that, and we're going to put it on Twitter, and we're going to shame the hell out of you for doing it, because it's not acceptable anymore. And I think we're seeing that happen now. We're seeing that with BIPOC. We're seeing that with women, and I think change is coming. Change is definitely coming.
Yeah, and I can see in the chat, one of the questions is, what's the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome so far, and how did you overcome that hurdle?
Biggest hurdle, I would say in year one, with the type of thing that we were doing in year one, which was building, we decided that we were going to build the world's biggest artificial intelligence summit with global leaders and so on and so forth, and we set a date. And the thing about events is, with a lot of businesses, as a founder, you can set a date, a launch date, but you can kind of move it if you need to. And the problem with large scale tech summits is you book your venue, you get going, and that's it. Then you're on a countdown to rockets going off. So I think the biggest hurdle that we found is we were building up the momentum, because everything that we're doing about building up a startup as a founder is building momentum, and no matter how small that is, and then riding that momentum to get to the next win and the next win. And we realized traditionally with large scale tech summits, it takes 18 months to organize and launch one, when you have a lot of backing and you have a reputation and you have everything else behind you. And we found ourselves 5 months out, having committed rather bravely to a disused gasworks in the centre of Amsterdam as our venue, because we decided we wanted to launch it as a kind of textile festival and go against the grain of the traditional white conference. And we found 4 months out that actually people were, with the tickets weren't selling, the sponsors weren't coming, and that was the moment when I kept, probably poor Vidya, my business partner, and my team, every day I was like, has anybody booked? No. So I think for us, that was the biggest hurdle, was sticking with it until the point we reached a tipping point where suddenly I remember celebrating when the first ticket got sold, and then suddenly now we get to a point where we'll sell 2,000 tickets overnight. So the hurdle was really not giving up until that tipping point and holding your nerve. And we were like, hold the nerve, it's going to happen. We're committed now, we're in. We've got to pay 200 grand or whatever it is for this venue. And getting beyond that, and then suddenly it came good. But our majority of our delegates, we now get 18,000 delegates over the course of the week to this event, but the majority of our delegates book in the last 2 weeks before the event. To give you an idea of the amount of stress the team and everybody was under. It was, and then would they turn up on the day, on the morning of the event, we were like, is anybody there? And we were like, oh my God, there's thousands of people there. Jesus. So
and that's just the roller coaster of big events, isn't it, as well? And you add to that doing it as a startup and building that momentum from scratch. It's a nail-biting, white-knuckle ride. Yeah. I guess when you're in the middle of it, you're in this hamster wheel. It's just all around you and it's all consuming. Like when I look in from the outside and we rattle off some of those incredible figures, it is inspirational. But I guess for yourself right in the middle of it, sometimes you can almost miss that and forget it. As you look back over the last few years and quite how far you've come, what is it that you draw most satisfaction from?
God, I think really it's more than anything is the fact that we've managed to make an impact. I wouldn't want us to be a fluffy organisation. We can, yes, okay, we turn a good profit. We do all of those things now. I have amazing people that I'm surrounded by in my team, with my shareholders, with the community that we've built. But I think we can. I don't know. I mean, I guess for me personally, it's probably it's really hard to say, but I think it's probably the fact that we've made an impact with things like building the first STEM school for girls in Afghanistan, in Kabul. The fact that we have made an impact with our artificial intelligence for medicine series, which is Some of the deals that have been done at that, for example, was that Microsoft and Novartis came together, and as a result, they're building out a global program for identifying breast cancer and various other things. You know, there are things that we have done as a team that have made a big impact to people's lives, and I guess sometimes we probably don't as a team talk about that enough. You know, we tend to roll with the punches and go on to the next thing, but looking back, it's probably the fact that we've made a big impact to some of those differences that we set out to do in the starting point.
Which I guess resonates so strongly with your why and the why of Inspired Minds. And you started with those big, lofty ambitions. If you weren't driven by having an impact, you know, that wouldn't have been where you started. And I preluded on Twitter before we joined, you know, one of those great impacts you had was managing to get an all-girl robotics team from Afghanistan past the Trump visa ban and travel ban to compete in the US. You know, that's just a mark of the kind of global impact that you were having. And that was still in the early days. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, that was amazing. So that was before we'd run our first summit. So that was a part of so there was the Muslim travel ban issued by Donald Trump. There was a team. There's a competition that happens every year for young inspiring robotics teams, and they get to put together a little bit of funding and backing and build a robot, and then they compete together in this championships in Washington. And this team from Kabul, right in the middle of a war zone, had built a robot by going to a recycling tip and getting what they could for free, and had built this amazing robot, had managed to get to the finals, and then were told that they couldn't go because they were banned under the Muslim travel ban. And their team mentor, Roya Mahboob, who's a friend and a business partner of mine now, had tweeted at the time, "I actually cannot believe this is happening. You've destroyed these girls' lives." And I saw it and I just thought, this is nuts. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. And as a team, we decided, we have quite a kind of feisty bunch of people in our team, and Inspired Minds are all driven by their whys, right? And of course, they all instantly said, well, what can we do? And we lobbied against that decision. We managed to get heads of government from around the world who wrote a petition letter. And then we got Prince Constantine of the Netherlands, who got involved and actually wrote a visa for them to attend Amsterdam and come to the event in Amsterdam. So we created our own robotics stage for them in Amsterdam, and got funding, flew them all over, got their visas. The entire team came over, took the stage at World Summit, and they got a standing ovation at the event. And not everybody, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, because 2 weeks before they came, and just to give an example therefore of what they'd come through to get to that point, 2 weeks before they came, Fatima, who's the captain of the robotics team, 13-year-old girl at the time, her father was her mentor, and he'd really backed them as a team, which is a brave thing to do in Afghanistan, backing girls to get education and to go into computer science and so on. And he was killed in a terrorist attack outside the embassy in Kabul. And she stood on the stage and said, "I am doing this for my dad." Now, at that point, of course, everybody in the audience it was just one of those goosebump moments. And as a result, they got X Prize and various other people coming up and saying, "We're going to back you." They've traveled now to over 46 countries around the world. They're called the Afghan Dreamers. Microsoft is was setting up a robotics camp in Kabul. They've built the first STEM school for girls in Afghanistan. So it just goes to show, I think, really how one small phone call or change, or just the team of us, there was 5 of us at the time, making a decision that actually that wasn't acceptable, then all they needed was that stage, and that's it. You know, they're off, and they're far more famous than any of us, and they're incredible. So yeah,
I mean, there's so much in that, and certainly puts perspective on risk and really having to bash through doors and not accept no in order to reach your dream. It is incredible, and to be a part of that and to enable that is obviously such a testament to the impact you're having. Sarah, you are such a role model to so many that would follow, and that perhaps need to be encouraged and empowered, that they don't have to take no, that they can push through doors that are closed in front of them, and then forge a path that can have this incredible impact globally. I mean, you really are. We could talk all evening. Well, I certainly could listen to you all evening on it. I guess as we pull it to a close, would there be one thing that you would want to say to potential, aspiring founders, particularly in Southampton University, I'm thinking of, and within our demographic? What would you want to say to them, the people that are thinking, should I or should I not take that first step?
Yeah, it's probably more a statement than one single thing. I would say know your story individually and know your why and know it inside out, and then back yourself with utter conviction to get to it. So, and don't let anybody deviate you from that. Once you know your story and your why, put it out there to the universe. Tell people why you're doing what you're doing. Don't be afraid to go out and tell people that's why you're doing it, and watch what happens, because people like to help other people. And there's a lot of negativity out in the world about, oh, you know, we can't do that because it's competitive or it's this, that, and the other. I totally disagree with that. I believe that if you know your why and you know what you want to do and what you're prepared to pay to get to that, then back yourself to do it, put it out to the universe, ask people for help. And that's when you start to create a movement, and it will happen. And I think the tool to help with that, sorry, and it's a closing statement, is visualization. When I say know your why, one of the most powerful things I did at the start was create, I called it a mood board or whatever, but I drew out with pictures from cut and pasting from the internet, myself on a beach with my kids, with them paddleboarding. And I knew that that's what I wanted to get to, just as the first milestone. That for me would be a win. And the second thing I did is visualize myself walking up on stage at World Summit AI and thousands of the whole community there, which was one of the first things that I did, and just believing that that would happen. And then you program yourself to believe it, you experience it, and it's so powerful. It's so powerful, because then when you start to get the knockbacks, and you will get the knockbacks and feel like you want to give up, it's knowing that will drive you through. And you can always go back to it and look at it, and it will keep you going when you feel like you need to give up, but you can't. You've got to just conviction. Go for it.
Sarah, thank you so much. There would be huge applause if we were in person, as we are when campus is open. There would be huge applause. Thank you so much. It's such an inspirational story. I can see that there are some questions that have been asked, so I'm just going to go and pull a few out of the chat. If you are watching, do put your questions in the chat, and we've got a little bit of time just to ask Sarah a few of those questions. So I can see that Till was asking, he was wondering if the lack of experience in AI at the beginning was ever obstructive during the journey, and if so, how do you overcome that?
I'm a quick learner. I think that's the first thing to say. You know, one of the most powerful opportunities that you have is you can learn, right? And I'm always learning, and you know, I read a lot, I go out and I learn from people constantly. So I think the first thing is, no, it wasn't an obstacle, and very quickly I made sure that I could understand the fundamentals of what I was talking about. And then I think you can always surround yourself with people that do know. And you know, we formed an advisory, we actually formed a business called Ada AI, which was a charity that was looking at working on some of the greatest issues that needed to be solved, but we appointed some of the world's most powerful people in artificial intelligence on that board. And that was people like Professor Gary Marcus, then Wendy Hall, who's actually from Southampton, and they were our advisors. And there were 18 of the most powerful people in artificial intelligence who, it's their job to know AI, and it was our job to know how to facilitate what needed to happen, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, absolutely. And interesting, there's a follow-on question from that from Becky, who's saying, what was it that motivated people to engage with you in that? So as you're getting started, you're starting from zero, it seems, and yet you're talking about some of the most powerful people in AI engaging with you. What is it that motivated them to engage with you?
It was, without sounding arrogant, you know, as much as there was no luck about what we did in the starting phase, we did, yes, okay, we didn't have the data and we didn't have the backing and the funding to be able to launch what we did, but we had an amazing product. And we had some of the best people, I think, involved in creating that product. So our content was exceptional. The way that we'd put the agenda together, you know, Vidya's a great researcher, market researcher, and she'd spent probably a good part of a year interviewing people to work out what really needed to happen. The stakeholders that we'd got as partners were the United Nations, were the World Health Organization, you know, so I think that as much as I'd like to say it was just because we were really cheeky and they really liked the sound of us, actually, we were bold and assertive with what we were saying we were going to do, and we believed it, and we said it with conviction, but also we had the proof and the backup of a great product to be able to go to market with it. We just didn't have the funds to market it. So I think that's what grabbed people's attention. And we always decided that we wanted to do things a little bit differently. So we hired the Disused Gasworks. We got an LA DJ who was a Red Bull DJ to stream the entire event to personas, songs for personas, just stuff like that just made us kind of stand out, really.
Which is, of course, what you have to do, isn't it? If you're not going to be different, why bother just doing the same thing? There's a question around getting into virtual events, and obviously you're in events. A pandemic comes along, it's a huge sideswipe on convention in what you're doing. How have you responded to that this year?
It's a really good question. So obviously it completely took us out of the market last year. So I think it was this time last year, actually, we just run our last physical event, which was Intelligent Health in London at Excel. And we were 2 weeks out from running World Summit AI in Montreal. So we had over 2,500 delegates due to come, 200 speakers, and nobody at that point had started cancelling events. And I just knew that it wasn't going to happen. I don't know why. I just knew it wasn't going to go ahead. So we actually called it about 2 weeks before it was a kind of national, the lockdowns and stuff started to happen. So initially we pivoted that event very, very quickly online, based purely on the fact that nobody else at that point had really done it. There weren't any great event tech platforms out there, but we knew we had great content and people were coming for that content and they were coming to make connections. So we facilitated the connections between people manually in the best way that we could so that they got what they needed. We spoke to all of our sponsors and community and they all supported us, which was great because they were all like, whoa, as well. And we recorded all the content and made it on demand because for us at that point, it was too risky to do it live. We then, though, as a starting block from that, sat down after we delivered that and said, okay, what needs to happen for the rest of this year? And we ripped up everything we knew about physical events and made the decision that you should not take, in my opinion, you should not take a physical event and replicate it online, because you just shouldn't. You should start with a digital first strategy that says, what does my community need to do? Be that connections, be it consuming content, be it education, and then rebuild your digital product according to that need. So that's what we did. And we had to test a lot. We've run, as I said to you before, over 50 online variations of events, be that webinars or meetups or whatever it is. And I think after a year of doing that now, and the support of our community, who, God love them, have stayed with us and worked with us through that process, because they're getting return from what we're doing. We're starting to really understand now that this is an omni-channel situation. I think a little bit like what happened in retail. There will always be a place for physical events, and there will always be a place for our community to meet in different ways, but that different way is a digital first strategy that we're now undertaking as a business, and that will now remain. So yeah, it's good. It's good. We've developed a new business stream. So
fantastic. I'm just going to take one final question. Grace is saying she would just love to know if any of those early doubters, the skeptics, the people who said you're going to lose everything, you've got no place here, like have some of them come back and changed their mind and re-engaged, or are they gone over the horizon?
Well, that's a really good question, because the guy that told me when I said I've sold my house and I put my house into this is now a stakeholder, and he invested. So yeah, I mean, he wasn't as brave as Chris Broad. He didn't do it the very early, which we always rib him about. But yes, he did. He's invested and he's now on the board with a chunk of money. So yes, they did. And I think, the best way to silence doubters is to prove. I don't really care so much that people think I'm going to fail. I mean, I don't really care their opinions on if they think that I'm going to fail for any particular reason. And the best way to prove that is actually not to care about that and do what you're doing and take action and do it really well. And the same comes to competition. I think we don't really look too much at what competition are doing. We just look at what our customer and our community wants and take action on that. And I think that's a really good way to put the blinkers on and get what you need to get done.
Sarah, thank you. As I said, you are a great inspiration and role model to so many people. It's been fantastic just to hear the behind the scenes story of what it's looked like in launching InspiredMinds. Thank you for being so open and it's just been absolutely fantastic. So thank you. There would be great applause. So as I say, do stay online. Sarah and I are going to be diving onto the chat. So we're going to be going onto a holding slide on this stream. We'll be going into the live chat. So if you have got some other questions that maybe I didn't cover, do put them in that chat again so we can pick them up there. Our next event, the next 20-minute founder, is going to be with Alina Golden, founder of Raptech Studios. That's going to be on the 25th of February. So do make sure that you join us then in a month's time. And finally, if you are part of the University of Southampton community, if you're thinking of launching a startup, if perhaps you've been inspired by what Sarah's shared today, then you know what to do. Get in touch, get involved, and whatever you do, do not take no for an answer. Sarah has shown you what you can do, so do not take no for an answer. Thank you very much indeed.